You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
This is the Hammock Hangers Podcast, where we hang out and talk about everything from hammocks and hammock camping to the group hangs from around the country.
Howdy Hangers, welcome to this week's episode of the Hammock Hangers Podcast. I really hope that everyone is doing their best to keep as cool as possible. I know there is severe heat waves going on, well, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, in a couple of different places here in the United States and in Europe as well. So I hope my European friends are also staying safe. Make sure you're keeping hydrated and really staying out of that sun as much as possible. Unfortunately, where we are at in Florida, it has pretty much come to my end of camping season, really, unless I traveled really far, which unfortunately doesn't seem to be in the cards for the rest of the summer before I start back to school. Got a few different events that I'm looking at attending in the fall as we kind of gear in hopes and wishes and thinkings of cooler weather, as well as getting into the big swing of HangCon planning as well in January. Now, just a reminder, HangCon tickets will go on sale here in the near future, and it will always be from next year until further notice. It will always be over MLK weekend, usually the second full weekend in January. So make sure you write that on your calendar. So make sure that you're following along on our Facebook and Instagram page, as well as right here with the Hammock Hangers Podcast to be aware of HangCon updates as well as hangs from different parts of the country as they become available. Now, today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. We've never really done a strict episode on gear review, and so I thought I would try that. So if you're listening to this and you really like this format, let me know in the comments or in a review that you leave wherever you get your podcast. Or if you see me out and about in the real world, just let me know how you feel about this particular format. But I want to be not just talking, but reviewing gear from Warbonnet. Now, Warbonnet, I have 4 pieces of gear that I'm going to be talking about today, and I probably have the biggest relationship as far as gear usage and for the longest duration with Warbonnet. Warbonnet, they were my first cottage vendor that I bought what I would consider serious gear from. When I first got into hammock camping and I wanted to branch out from my one nest system, which opened the floodgates for me as far as the hammock world is concerned, but I knew that it could be done better. And Warbonnet at the time had just released the very first generation of their XLC hammock. It was a lot of the talk on hammock forums, back when hammock forums was really the gateway and really the highway of information for the hammock community. And I had to see, I felt a lot of the fear of missing out if I did not hop on board with this hammock that had a shelf, which originally was the big pull on top of the hype that really gravitated me toward the XLC. I really like just the way that my braided ADHD kind of works. I like having a spot for everything. I like having that storage in the hammock that I can reach and access stuff. And the shelf was just this really cool, unique way of managing that situation. So I'm also going to be talking. So I'm going to be talking about the Gen 3 XLC that has just came out. I'm going to be talking about my new Mountain Fly Tarp and my new Generation 2 Wooki Underquilt. And I'm going to be talking about the new updated version of the Diamondback Top Quilt. Now, all of these designs have been updated in the last year or so. So all of the reviews that I'm going to be talking about today and all the gear is the current generation of products from Warbonnet. Now, I'm also a huge fan of Warbonnet Ridge Runners and their Lynx Underquilt, but that may be a future episode that I talk about those. But the reason I want to talk about this particular 4-item setup is this has been the setup that I have really put through the paces in the last year. When the Gen 3 XLC came out, probably the latter part of 2025, I was very intrigued by it, and I really was late on getting into the Wooki scene as far as the underquilt goes. So I got one and really enjoyed it, and then the Generation 2 Wooki came out. And I've always wanted a Mountain Fly from them, and I'll talk about kind of the reasons why when I get to talking about the actual piece of gear. And I've had the Diamondback Top Quilt really as soon as they released the new updated version. I ordered one just because I really wanted one. They have kind of unique features, which I'll talk about here in a second. And this has been kind of the gear that I've used really almost exclusively, with the exceptions of a few different hangs. I used most of this gear in Denmark. I used it for HangCon California and one other hang that I went to, as well as this is the gear that I took on my little summer trip to Shenandoah National Park this summer as well. So it's seen its paces, and I feel at this point I've used it enough to be able to talk about it in a relatively expert opinion. So let's dive into it. I'm going to start with the Diamondback Top Quilt. Now, what's so special about the Diamondback Top Quilt? Well, it has a very unique set of diamond-esque baffles in the kind of the center portion of the top quilt. Now, you may ask, well, why is that important, and why would a manufacturer do that? The reason being, it really helps mitigate the down migration from one end of your quilt to the other. Some vendors, one that comes to mind is Loco Libre. They also use a Caro step baffling to kind of limit the down moving up and down the baffles. And when you have baffles that run just the entire length of a quilt, whether it be top quilt or underquilt, down can really move freely from one end to the other. And where that becomes a problem is if all of your down moves to one end of your quilt or the other, you're going to get cold spots because that down is not evenly distributed. So that's why, when we open up our gear after we've packed it in and it's been compressed for a day or so while we're traveling, or if you maybe mess up and forget to take it out once you've traveled and it's been compressed for like a month or so, you take it out and fluff it up, and that really helps spread that down out and really prevent any cold spots. Now, the Diamondback one has the diamond baffles in the center portion, and that kind of keeps the down really at the top part of the quilt and the bottom area of the quilt all put together. So my particular Diamondback Top Quilt is a 40 degree, and it is filled with 850 fill power goose down. I went with the fern green and the international orange on the inside, which is kind of like a blaze orange. It's really bright. It's really eye catchy. I really thoroughly enjoy it. I'll probably post some pictures on our thumbnail of the quilt. And I'm sure if you looked on our Instagram, you've seen me use this quilt in the past year or so. Now, as far as the weight goes, it is a long cut, but it is only the 50-inch wide. I went with the long because sometimes I really like to just throw the quilt over my head and just sleep in a cocoon there. I also added the draft collars as well, and mine has the sewn wide mouth foot box. I went with that only because if my feet get cold, then the rest of my body gets cold. And also, if my feet get cold, they take forever to warm back up. So that's why usually when I order a quilt, unless it's something I specifically plan to use for summer, I always get a sewn foot box. That's just my personal preference. That way I don't have to worry about any drafts coming in where my feet are, because Lord forbid if my feet get cold. The weight on this quilt is just a touch higher than 19 ounces as far as the scale weight goes. And it is made of a 15D nylon fabric. You can also get the quilt in a 20D nylon fabric if you want one of their camo prints. I actually also got the differential cut on the side, which what that does is the outside shell is made a little bit wider. And so when you are in the quilt and you're, stretching your knee out or stretching your elbow out, normally, if you don't have that differential cut, you might can compress your down a little bit. And in that case, you may get cold spots. I'm able to wrap the quilt around me in the hammock. I can stretch my knees out. I can, kind of spread out. And I'm not really a thin person either, so naturally some of it just stretches out. But that really keeps that loft in the baffles, even if the internal layer is being stretched out. Now, I'm not putting a lot of tension on it, but that outside layer still blossoms, stays kind of lofted, even though the internal layer is pulled a little bit tighter. Now, when you order this Diamondback Top Quilt, it actually comes with a stuff sack, which honestly I don't use. But more importantly, it comes with a storage sack as well, so you don't have to pay extra for that. Now, let me talk about the performance of this Diamondback Top Quilt. I thoroughly enjoy this quilt quite a bit. In fact, it has really put up a lot of my poor choices, especially as far as storage goes. I know at one point I had this as part of a system in a Dutchware Anaconda, and I brought it home from a trip and I kind of forgot about it. And it remained compressed for about 2 months. And when I realized it, I was packing up for my next trip. Like, okay, well, we're going to see how this kind of works. I stretched out, really fluffed up the underquilt and top quilt of this particular setup, and it still remained true to temperature rating. I gave it a little bit of extra fluff. I gave it time to kind of loft up from being compressed. And I was shooting in temperatures still in the lower 40s, and I stayed roasty toasty warm. I will say with this Diamondback Top Quilt, I used this top quilt as my top cover at HangCon this year, where temperatures got down into the upper 20s. Now, I was using my Dutchware Hellbender 20 degree at HangCon. So I did have a 20 degree underquilt, but I just had this Diamondback 40 degree top quilt. And I'll say, I stayed warm the entire event. I never had any cold spots. So this Diamondback top quilt performed, in my opinion, well above expectations for that 12 degree difference from actual temperature for temperature rating. So that really is a testament to Warbonnet's comfort rating, not just survival rating that you might get from some lower quality, usually big brand quilts. So I would definitely recommend this top quilt as far as pretty much a summer, a fall, spring set. Well, depending on where you're at in Florida, it could be a 4 season. But it really performed really, really well. I never had any issues with the down at the foot getting thin. Even after being compressed, it still performed to expectations. So Warbonnet, the Diamondback Top Quilt is really, really good. I think it's a big improvement off their original design, which I also have one of their before they went to the diamond baffles. And it still really works, but I would say the new design that they have for their top quilts is really, really nice. The fabric feels really light, and it feels also very durable as well. I would say the fabric that I have on my other Warbonnet top quilt definitely is, it's a little softer per se, but it doesn't have that maybe rugged feel that I would really want, because I'm not a huge person to really baby my gear. I just like stuff that I can use and not have to worry about every single thing that I'm doing. So thoroughly would recommend this Diamondback Top Quilt. Now, let's move on to the Gen 2 Wooki Underquilt. Now, as I said, I was really late to the game as trying out a Wooki Underquilt, only because I got into quilted hammocks. My quilted chameleon, I thoroughly enjoy. I have my Superior gears. I have my Dutchware Hellbender as well. And I thought that I was just done with separate top quilts that I would have to add on and then take off. I like the idea of having the hammock that I want and throwing an underquilt on depending on what temperatures that I'm looking at. But with a separate underquilt, I always had like issues. I never felt that I could get to the point where I know without a shadow of a doubt that underquilt is not going to slip out from under my hammock in the middle of the night. I had plenty of times where, there was a lot of fiddle factor with the suspension that I really didn't like. And that was one of the reasons also that I really jumped into and loved the Ridge Runner and its underquilt, the Lynx, because the suspension was really just 4 carabiners attached to the 4 corners of the bridge hammock, and that's all that I had to worry about. I didn't have to worry about adjusting some shock cord loops, one or the other, making sure that, oh, this is a little bit tighter, oh, this is a little bit looser. You don't want to make it too tight because it'll compress it down, but you don't want to make it too loose because we get drafts. That fiddle factor I did not enjoy. So I kind of wrote off the Wooki Underquilt when it first came out. And about a year ago, I found one used, and I just said, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot. The reviews seemed to be pretty good. They talked about a little bit of, might be a little flappy on some of the fabric sides, but I'm going to give this a try, an educated effort. So I bought a Gen 1 20-degree Wooki Underquilt, and I gave it a try for a trip that I went on. I think it was 2 or 3 nights, and it performed flawlessly. I really liked the fact that the only suspension that I had to worry about was hooking it to the head end and the foot end of the hammock, and I was done. Now, I thought maybe, okay, well, I'm looking at this quilt hung to my hammock, and I do see a little bit of the flappy sides, but also this was before I got in the hammock. And I was like, okay, well, I can see maybe where this would let in some drafts or whatever, but it never really did. It stayed locked in. When I got in the hammock, I didn't have any chill spots. It is at both the Gen 1 and Gen 2 Wooki Underquilts. They are cut at a specific lay, so they're not symmetrical. They are an asymmetric lay. So when you order one, you have to kind of specify, are you a head right or a head left layer, for lack of a better term, so you can make sure that you get the one for you. And I was kind of hooked. I really liked how it really performed really, really well. I didn't have to worry about it moving, and it just did what it claimed to do. So when the Gen 2 came out, there was a little bit of talk about design changes. And two of the design changes that Brandon made, which I actually got to talk to him at Georgia Bushcraft last year, and about what changes to the Gen 2 Wookiee, because I had not too far in the past bought my Gen 1, and he was telling me about some of the cuts that they had made or design shifts to make the quilt lay a little bit more secure to the hammock. And they also added magnets to the Gen 2 Wookiee and the Gen 3 XLC, so it would kind of snap together on both sides. So let's talk about my piece of gear that I ordered not too long after that conversation. So I already had a 20 degree Gen 1 Wookiee, so I went ahead and I got a 40 degree Gen 2 Wookiee. So my 40 degree is also 850 fill power filled. I did get 1 ounce of overstuff, and my quilt weighs approximately 17 ounces for the weight. Now, Warbonnet does offer a Wookiee 10 and a Wookiee 11. I went with the Wookiee 11 because I have an XLC, and XLC is a 11-foot hammock. Now, it's designed specifically for the XLC, but with some slight modifications, you can use the Wookiee for other hammocks. You just might have to adjust kind of the suspension that you are using. With the 11, they advertise that it will comfortably lay with anyone up to 6 foot 6 inches. So I'm nowhere near that. I'm right at 6 foot, but I never have any trouble with my shoulders or head getting cold, nor, more importantly for me, my feet getting cold. Now, as I said before, it does offer a differential cut, so it forces you into an asymmetrical lay for it to really work. Now, you may think, oh, why don't they make it asymmetric? Well, because, for one, it's specifically designed for the XLC. The XLC is an asymmetrical hammock. Also, with an asymmetrical quilt, you actually save weight and you save bulk, which is important for those people that are really concerned with saving weight as well as the packability as well. Not just backpackers, but also bike packers, kayak campers, motorcycle campers. Weight may not always be the prime factor that you take into account when you are buying gear, but also compactability as well. And that's the benefit of this asymmetrical lay. Now, here's some of my, so I've used this quilt quite a bit in this setup, and I will say that the Wookiee, hands down, without a doubt, is my favorite stand-alone underquilt. It gives me all the benefits that I would have with a quilted hammock, but if I wanted to, I could change it out depending on what type of temperature rating that I would camp in. Right now, I've got a 40 degree, which honestly, for the most part, is 75% of the camping that I do anyway. But I also have a 20 degree as well, just in Gen 1. And for those, I'm not really looking at camping anywhere close to under 20. So I've hemmed and hawed about maybe purchasing a 0 degree as well, just because I love the design so much. But for the most part, right now I'm pretty happy with my 40 degree and 20 degree. I have taken this 40 degree down to 40, maybe 38. There were a couple nights in Hancon, California, where it may have topped right at 40 or maybe got just slightly below 40, and I was perfectly warm. I will say, when it got down into the really upper 30s, I could feel that maybe the quilt was hitting its true kind of comfort, roasty, toasty warm. I think if it got down, dropped any more, maybe to like 35, then I may start to be not cold, but not truly, I'm really snug and warm in here. I'd still be warm, just maybe not sealed off warm. But again, 40 degree, it performed to temperature ratings. Now, one thing that I personally did change on mine, for the sake of quality of life, the loops that they include on the Wooki are made from, I want to say, either a nylon or a polyester cordage. It's not stretchy, and that system does work. I always like to add a little bit of caution when I'm using things that I am putting my weight into. So one of the things that I did, I changed one loop on each end to kind of a more higher thickness shock cord, only because if I get in and something goes wrong, the cord will stretch and it's not rigid, so I won't have the fear that either the loop or the fabric on either end will break. It gives me a little bit of security, a little fiddle factor, or a little leeway one way or the other. So that's the only things that I changed. I thoroughly enjoy the quilt. It performed just as well as the Gen 1. Now let's talk about the magnets. Now the magnets are there, and I do have a Gen 3 XLC as well that I'll be talking about here shortly. The magnets do clip on, but the magnets are like little coin magnets. I'm not completely sold that they are a huge asset, because I never had any problems with the Gen 1 slipping one way or the other. I think that the cuts that Warbonnet made in their design, or the changes that they made in the design, are enough to kind of keep that in. I guess maybe the magnets are more visual because it really just snaps your quilt to your hammock, but I don't know if they're necessarily necessary because numerous times that I have got in, the magnets aren't even connected, and I've had no problems. So I think probably a cool factor. Are they a game changer as far as making sure the quilt works? Nah, I don't think so. All right, so let's moving on to the Mountain Fly. Now, one of the things that I really like about a series of Warbonnet tarps, their Mini Fly, their Thunderfly, and their Mountain Fly, is they offer a tarp with doors. So you can imagine your regular hexagonal tarp, but instead of full doors that you would see on a true winter tarp, these are almost slanted half doors. And I first started this design, I bought a Mini Fly a good bit ago, and I thoroughly did enjoy that tarp. If you own a Tensa 4 stand, the 11-foot Mini Fly, I want to say that tarp, it almost feels like that 11-foot Mini Fly is designed to go on that Tensa 4 stand. Because one thing that I thoroughly enjoyed about that tarp was not only would it fit on a Tensa 4 hammock stand without the tarp extensions, which I find really tedious and kind of fiddle factor, that I don't enjoy. You can actually hook that tarp directly to the ends of the stand without the tarp extensions needed. I also thoroughly liked it because it provided a lot more secure rain protection with the doors, but because the doors don't go all the way down to the bottom, it made it significantly easier getting in and out of out from under the tarp in the rain or late at night, that you didn't have to worry about opening doors, stepping over guy lines. You could easily just step under the half doors and get into your hammock. It made the experience a lot easier. But the problem with the Mini Fly became that it's pretty little more narrow on the sides than I would really, really like. So I upgraded to a Thunderfly. And when I was ordering everything else, I just made the choice of getting a Mountain Fly. I wanted a setup that I could really use more for like stealth camping, or if I went, hunting, that would be kind of a out of the way. I don't want people to see me there. Maybe I was inspired a little bit from my European friends, where a lot of their gear is very camo. Natural colors, your olive greens, your browns, or even black. So I wanted kind of a more low key setup. So I ordered a Mountain Fly. I did get a 12-foot ridge seam. I like a little bit more room on one side or the other. Uh, it is made from their 30D Sil Poly. And I did get the Shadow Pine camo. I will say the camo pattern that Brandon uses, which they actually developed, they're not using it from some designer. They developed this particular camo pattern. It's probably one of my favorite camo patterns out on the market right now. All of them are really cool. I will say every single one that I have seen looks significantly better in person than they do on the website. And even on the website, they look pretty cool, but in person, they look significantly better. And they offer, I want to say, four or five different variants, depending on the foliage that you have in your area, or the foliage that you have in the type of gear that you are camping. So I got 12-foot 30D Sil Poly with the Shadow Pine camo. I did get the tie outs on the side just because I like to add a pole mod as well to kind of stretch out the sides of the tarp. Now, I also got the middle ground tie out, which allows an internal, a single internal pole mod as well. Me personally, I have not used the internal pole mod before for that particular one. All the internal pole mods that I have used have been double pole mods. But the one thing that I really wanted with this single middle ground tie out is I always liked I want to say it was the Black Crow tarp design out on Hammock forums many, many, many years ago that had it had 3 tie outs on both sides and 2 cat cuts. The benefit of that is in heavy wind, with just 2 tie outs on the front and the back, it still allowed for a lot of give and a lot of stretch in your fabric. So when that wind would really be coming at you from the side, it didn't really give it too much support from blowing into your hammock, especially when it rains, and that causes a little bit of inconvenience in some cases as well. But I wanted that to provide a little bit more structure, and I really got to put this to the test when we were in Shenandoah. We got a couple nights of really heavy rain and really heavy wind, and I will say that the single tie out in the middle provided significantly better results than I thought it would. It really helped hold and pull the tarp away from me, especially when the wind was hitting on the side. Now, as far as weight goes, I have not weighed my particular one, but the 11-foot Mountain Fly does come in at about 18 ounces, and that's before you add a ridgeline as well. For me, I actually chose to do a split ridgeline, which is kind of a deviation from my normal continuous ridgeline that I usually add. Again, I wanted to try something different. I got a new tarp, and so I just chose this to put on. So I'm using a pair of Dutchware Stingers. with 20 feet of zinget on both ends of the tarp. Has worked phenomenally well so far. I also added 6-foot zinget guy lines, and I'm using tack toggles on those. That seems to be my new kind of go-to system as far as tarp goes, and didn't have any issues with those slipping at all. And I'm using MSR groundhogs as my stake of choice. Really enjoyed this tarp. It gives me plenty of protection. I really like the slanted doors of getting in and out of the hammock. I definitely see I'll be using this tarp a lot more. My very first tarp that I ever bought from a real manufacturer, which was also Warbonnet, my Superfly, I still use occasionally. I have a few of them now. My family, when we go on big trips, they all usually have, at least my son and daughter, they always take one of my Superflies. They love that tarp as well. The Mountain Fly provides just as much protection for the most part, and it allows those slanted doors, makes it easy entry and exit out from under the tarp. So props to Warbonnet for this Mountain Fly, and super props for your camo, because I really thoroughly enjoy the camo as well. All right, now let's get into the XLC part of this review. Now, those of you who may heard me talk about the XLC in the past know that I have a very tumultuous relationship with it. When I first got it, it was a huge upgrade from my Eno double nest that I'd been using for a few months before I really dove into the cottage fender. I took my Gen 1 XLC on my very first hammock camping backpack trip many moons ago. Actually had not tested it really before that happened, so that was kind of a risk, but I thoroughly did enjoy it. However, I've always talked about the fiddle factor that I had with setting it up. It was never uncomfortable, but I had a hard time really nailing down what I needed to do in order to make it lay perfectly every single time. I will say the XLC, even the Gen 3, does require a little bit of a different lay or a different hang angle than a lot of other manufacturers on the market. It does really require a significant height difference on your foot end than your head end. When they say between 13 and 17 inches higher on your foot end than your head end, pretty legit. And that still remains the case. But even with Gen 1, I had trouble really nailing down. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. It seems like I'm hanging this the same way every single time. It has a ridge line. Why am I having issues with it? But I tended to have problems with it. And when Gen 2 came out, I was like, okay, well, they definitely fixed a lot of the gripes that I had about Gen 1, but it still had that fiddle factor of making sure that it was comfortable every single time that I was, laying in the hammock. Enter Gen 3. Originally, when it first came out, I said, you know what, I'm going to pass. I've tried the Gen 2, and I don't really use it all that much. Maybe I'm just going to skip out on this. And then when we were coming back from Michigan, we got diverted to Punta Gorda instead of flying into Tampa because of a storm. And while on the tarmac in Punta Gorda waiting to fly back to Tampa, I broke into temptation and ordered one. And they had just released not too long, maybe a few weeks, so they didn't have a lot in stock. But I did order a foliage green version because, again, I wanted this to kind of be the first piece of my stealthy stealth camp kind of setup, and so that's why I went with the foliage green, which I apparently it's not a very popular color, but I thoroughly enjoy that color. Now let's talk about a little bit about the specs. The Gen 3 XLC is going to run you about 19 ounces, and that's going to be before you add whatever suspension that you are going to be using. Warbonnet offers a few different options from them, but if you want to add your own that you either have made or another setup that you thoroughly enjoy using and have experience with, changing out your suspension on a XLC is extremely easy, and I'll talk about that why here in a second. The XLC is an 11-foot body. It is 62 inches wide, and it has a 112 inch ridgeline. It is a asymmetrical hammock, so you must lay either head right or head left every single time, or it don't work. The design of the hammock, you must lay in an asymmetrical every single time. So when you order your XLC, make sure that you know or you're comfortable with whatever direction that you are laying. By default, their default is head left, foot right. So if you need a head right, feet left lay, then you're going to need to add that when you make your order. It does come with a fully removable bug net. They also offer a winter cover as well. Another cool thing is it has a 7-inch panel between kind of the main part of the bug netting and the zipper. And what this really does, it provides a little bit of an extension to keep that bug net off your face. Now, it does require staking out, which I'll kind of talk about my opinions on that here in a second. But one of the reasons that it's super easy to change the suspension in any XLC, and I would assume the Traveler and the Eldorado are similar. I don't own either of those hammocks, but I can imagine they would be similar, is Warbonnet actually just whips and ties down the ends of their hammock. They don't run the continuous loop through the channel at the end of both ends. So they just kind of larks head it on. And that makes it easier for changing out the suspension. You just unlarks it and larks head your next suspension right on just under the gathered in ball of the hammock. It's super, super easy to do. In fact, that's one of the first things that I did because for this setup, I am using Dyneema webbing with a Beckett hitch system. And with a Beckett hitch suspension system, I always get rid of continuous loops and I put on universal loops just because it makes life significantly easier untying that Beckett hitch in the morning when I am packing up. So it took me maybe 2 minutes max to change out the suspension in the XLC by replacing those with the universal loops. It also continues to have that iconic shelf storage inside the hammock. One of the changes that they did make to the Gen 3 is you can still use the shelf inside the hammock even if you unzip the zipper because of the way the bug net is setting up. The zipper becomes over the shelf instead of around the outside of the shelf, so you can still use it even if you kind of remove the bug net. Which, and again, I find this shelf extremely useful for throwing up bigger pieces of gear. I like to kind of stuff my top quilt in there when I'm getting into my hammock and just take it out when I'm already in. That way I'm not laying on my top quilt and I'm having to pull it out from under my big butt and, risk, breaking some of the stitching. It makes that a little bit easier. If I'm in colder weather, if I've got a big bulky jacket and I'm not using for a pillow, I can throw that up there. Usually that's where I'm throwing my light, my headlamp, my glasses, my phone, power bank, whatever that I'm having for car camping. That usually goes in that shelf, and it'll hold quite a bit of gear. It is compatible with not only Warbonnet's 3/4 length underquilt, the Yeti, but it also is compatible for any Gen 1 or Gen 2 Wooki Underquilt. Warbonnet also makes a underquilt protector for it as well. It can also be set up as a bivy system as well. This is something that I have not tried because I've not had to, and it's not something that I would probably do for 99.9% of the camping that I have done. But Warbonnet also touts that with the use of a ground sheet, obviously to protect the fabric of the hammock, you can use this along with a tarp to kind of make a bivy system if you're in a situation where you cannot hang from trees or you can't have a stand. It is sewn and made right here in the United States. This is the case for all of Warbonnet's gear. They recently moved out from Colorado. They're now in Tennessee, but all of their stuff is made in house, which is really props for a good American cottage vendor. Now, so here's some of the things that I thoroughly love about the new Gen 3 XLC. Their new design. It makes it significantly easier to set up and to a point where it is comfortable every single time. I have not had, no, I take that back. I've had one time that I have set this up, not really trying to be super specific on the hang angle, just knowing that my foot end needs to be higher than my head end, visibly higher, but I haven't measured it out. There was only one time that I got kind of a minor bit of calf ridge, but I made a little bit of adjustment and it nailed it down. So this is one of the reasons that I've been able to use this hammock so much in the last year, because setting it up has been significantly easier that I could be comfortable every single time. Now, the XLC that I purchased is their regular single layer, not their heavyweight. They do offer a lightweight double layer, and they also offer a heavyweight double layer. And so if you are on the higher weight spectrum of things, then you may want to go for a double layer and the heavy layer. I will say, I was using my Gen 1 and Gen 2 XLCs. I had both of those are the heavyweight double layer, north of 400 pounds. So they are really bomb-proof hammocks, holding up to a lot of weight. This one here is, you're looking at, they say the comfort rating is around 250. I'm a little north of that, and it is still super, super comfortable. Now, one thing that I do like that Warbonnet has done, and they've always done this, the ridge line that they put in the hammock is made out of Amsteel, not Zinget. It's a little bit heavier, marginally, but I thoroughly like the kind of bomb-proof-esque aspect of having an Amsteel ridge line versus a very thin Zinget ridge line. That gives me a little bit more security, especially if I'm hanging and my ridge line is super tight. I don't try to do that all the time, but sometimes situation requires for a much tighter ridge line, and I know that thicker cordage is going to hold up to a lot more tensile stretch than, let's say, a Zinget one will be. Also, with some of the gear, it makes it a little bit easier to kind of move stuff on, and especially when I was heavier with the 7/64 Amsteel, I had no problem reaching up, grabbing the ridge line, and pulling myself up because I knew it was a lot thicker and not only going to cut into my fingers when I'm trying to lift myself up, but it was also going to be a higher tensile rated as well and not break. Now, some things that I maybe am not a fan of the new Gen 3, or some things that I would change out. And a lot of these are just personal preferences. They're not really design flaws. There's just not something that I personally would have gone. With this new Gen 3, and this is something that I talked to Brandon about, is they changed the color of their zipper. So it's more of like a mustard yellow, which actually, in a way, looks really, really cool with a lot of their prints, especially their solid color prints. It's just a color addition that they've added. The one thing that I would change, I would have preferred a black zipper, especially for this being my stealthy setup. But it does really look really good as an accent color. But just for my personal usage and this setup, I would have preferred black. The zippers that they use are a little smaller than probably, let's say, something on the Chameleon or some of my other zippered hammocks. I would have gone with a little bit bulkier of a zipper, which they may do in some of their heavier weight hammocks. But for this one, I did add zipper pulls. It wasn't a huge factor. Just, I've got huge hands, so the really tiny zippers are not really a personal preference of mine. But again, just something that I would change. Now, with the bug net, I mentioned earlier that they have that little panel where it kind of keeps the bug net off your face, which I really, really like. But it does require staking out your bug net on both sides, at least very much the side that you enter into the hammock. Now, this can be a little bit annoying because for me, I'm clumsy. I will trip over guy lines as much as possible, so I usually don't use them. For all of my Chameleons, they always come with the tie-outs. I think I've got a huge box of Chameleon tie-outs because I've never installed them on my hammock because I don't like extra lines that I can trip over. I can't forego that for the XLC because that's what really gives the bug net structure. So for me, what I found, it kind of mandates that I enter into under the tarp from the foot end of the hammock. Again, not a huge deal, just a kind of a quality of life annoyance per se. What I thought about doing, I really liked the spreader bar bug net that Dutch kind of came out with. Maybe you could do a mod where you sewed kind of attachment points to the bug net to kind of use maybe one of the mini ones to kind of push that ball up. That would kind of eliminate the need to staking out to provide that structure. But just quality of life. Now, one thing that I will say that I really wish Warbonnet would change and fix on not just the Gen 3, but also the Ridge Runners as well. And I thought they had fixed it with the Gen 2 XLC because they changed out one specific thing that always annoys me: the shock cord. The shock cord that comes stock, especially with my Gen 1 XLC, my Ridge Runners that I've ordered from them, Ridge Runners that I've ordered from other people that are used, and this new Gen 3, I detest. I think it's really not that great a shock cord. The shock cord that came with my Gen 2 was like it was hardier. It may have had like a kind of reflective thing. And it was much better. But I guess they went back to the old brand. Guys, I immediately got rid of it. It's really, really stretchy, and it doesn't really feel kind of a premium aspect. So I would suggest changing out the shock cord, which is what I did and what I'll talk about. What did I upgrade immediately on the XLC to fit my personal preference? First thing is I replaced the shock cord with some of, I think I got it from Paracord Planet. It's kind of reflective, so I can see it kind of late at night with my headlamp, and it's a little bit stouter as well. And it provides a little bit more structure to it's not as stretchy. I did add a ridgeline organizer just because I like extra storage. The shelf is great, but if I've got a big bulky jacket in there, there's not too much room for a lot of other things that I can easily access. So I just added a ridgeline organizer from Tough Possum Gear. And the only other thing that I changed that I talked about earlier is I added the universal loops to replace the regular continuous loops that came stock with the hammock. Now, what do I think about the XLC? The Generation 3 converted me back to really, really loving the XLC. Like I said, if I didn't love it, I wouldn't have used it so much or continued to use it. This is the one piece of Warbonnet gear that originally I was very apprehensive about, really diving into, but I'm really glad that I did. The XLC is a great update. If you're interested in, maybe picking one up, I would say go for it. If you already own a Gen 1 or Gen 2 XLC, I would say even the Gen 3 is a worthy upgrade if you're looking to potentially upgrade either now or down the road. Definitely check them out. I would like to say thank you to Warbonnet for being a huge supporters of the hammock community throughout the years. I know they have graciously donated to HangCon raffles, not just in Florida, but also into California as well, and potentially maybe even Denmark. So thank you for that. I know they donate gear to other hangs throughout the country. They're really great people. I'm really glad that I got to meet them at Georgia Bushcraft this past year, and finally was able to get them to HangCon as well. It was one of the experiences where Brandon was exactly who I was hoping and thought that he would be. We had great conversations. His staff was incredibly friendly and really a top-notch crew at both Georgia Bushcraft and HangCon in Florida this year. Hopefully, I'll get to see them again at Georgia Bushcraft coming in, I want to say November, first weekend in November in Georgia. And hopefully they'll grace us with their presence at HangCon again in 2027. So that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode and this new gear review format. Hopefully I haven't annoyed you guys too much with my ramblings. And this episode actually went on for a lot longer than I thought it would. So I get really excited about the gear, especially gear that I trust. So yeah, definitely check out Warbonnet's gear. They make really, really good stuff. Now, if you have liked what you've heard me talk about today, I would really appreciate if you were to give us a like and subscribe on wherever you get your podcast from, and leave us a positive review as well, or drop us a comment. It really helps feed that internet algorithm to help get our podcast out to more and more people so we can encourage growth and education within our hammock community. And I really hope to see you guys using your favorite pieces of gear at a hang or a camping event. Well, for me, sometime in the fall. So until next time, happy hanging, everybody.
As we gently sway out of another hammock field episode, we want to thank you, our wonderful listeners, for hanging out with us on the Hammock Hangers Podcast. We hope that you have found relaxation, inspiration, and a renewed sense of connection to nature through our discussions. Remember to keep that hammock spirit alive in your daily life, whether it's by taking a few moments to unwind in your own backyard oasis, or by planning your next hammock adventure in the great outdoors. Embracing the tranquility, embracing the simplicity, and never forget the joy that comes from simply hanging around. Before we part ways, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date with all things hammock related. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search for the Hammock Hangers Podcast. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to hang with you again on our next episode. Until then, stay relaxed, stay adventurous, and keep on hanging those hammocks high. From all of us here at the Hammock Hangers Podcast, we wish you peaceful hangs and endless relaxation. Thank you for tuning in. Happy hanging, everyone.